Imagine one day you open up ancient Netflix. Topping the charts are two big names: Homer, the blind old man known for rap battling the gods, and Plato, the serious philosopher who loved canceling artists even more than today's moralists on Twitter. But the real drama is not about Zeus or Achilles. It is the clash of two minds: on one side, the immortal ghostwriter; on the other, the master of philosophical fan fiction. And the biggest shock of all, it was none other than Plato, the father of idealist philosophy, who became the very first moderator to cancel Homer from society. Before we dive into this intellectual beef that has lasted over 2,400 years, if you enjoy digging into those "wait, is that really true" kind of facts in history, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss out. And drop a comment letting me know where you first heard about this, because I find it wild that these ancient stories are still connecting us today, from Athens all the way to YouTube. Trust me, the Homer versus Plato drama is not just ancient history. It will make you question who truly defines human wisdom: the storyteller or the one who rewrites the tale. You might think cancel culture was invented by Twitter, TikTok, or Reddit, that chaotic game where someone is trending at #1 today, only to wake up tomorrow with every contract dropped, fans turning their backs, and the fandom splitting into civil war. Sorry to break it to you, but 2,400 years ago, the philosopher Plato executed the first ever cancel, and the victim was none other than Homer. Yes, that Homer, the blind old man who told mythological tales, the father of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Two masterpieces that, if he were alive today, would have landed him a 10-season deal with Netflix, an HBO spin-off, and a Marvel collaboration launching the Homer cinematic universe. And yet Plato, that stern old man obsessed with building a perfect city like a dictatorial version of The Sims, flat out declared, Homer is corrupting the youth. Banish him from society immediately. The first cancel in history, and perhaps the most brutal. Now picture Homer as an ancient content creator. No camera, no microphone, no stream deck. All he had was his voice, and an imagination larger than the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Iliad, a 10-year-long war epic triggered by a hot girl named Helen, whose face was so beautiful it sparked the deaths of thousands. The Odyssey, a 24-episode adventure series following Odysseus as he gets lost for 10 years, facing monsters, goddesses, witches, before coming home to wipe out 108 men freeloading off his wife. Drama levels even higher than Game of Thrones, gods popping in like Marvel cameos. Boss fights straight out of Dark Souls, love, betrayal, war, death tears, and slow motion. In short, Homer was Netflix, HBO, and Hollywood rolled into one, only without a subscription fee. And Plato. He was more like a highbrow podcaster, his content pure philosophy, his format 300-page dialogues with no kissing scenes, no fights, and no soundtrack. Video thumbnail a single word: Justice Views 200. Top comment: fell asleep halfway. Plato was convinced that only his kind of content could help humanity live morally. And he looked at Homer the same way Harvard professors look at Keeping Up with the Kardashians. This drama does not feed the intellect. Cancel it now. In the Republic, Plato dropped this cold line. In an ideal society, there is no place for Homer. Poetry makes people weak, emotional, and irrational. Sounds exactly like those early 2000s American parents who banned their kids from listening to Eminem saying rap is garbage. Exactly like Gen Z parents today blaming TikTok for melting their children's brains. Plato was basically the original boomer posting 280-character cancel rants back in 380 before the Common Era. Here's the irony: Plato canceled Homer on paper. But in real life, Homer became immortal. The Greeks memorized the Iliad and Odyssey the way K-pop fans memorize their idols' rap verses. Every festival had someone singing Homer's tales. Every wine-fueled party brought up Achilles' Hector or Odysseus. Children grew up listening to Homer like bedtime stories. Plato could erase Homer from his books, but he could not erase Homer from people's minds. Just like how you can ban your kid from watching TikTok, only to find out they are still watching it on a secret account. That is what stung the most. Plato spent his whole life writing, dreaming up a perfect city, crafting ideas about justice, the soul, you name it. And yet today, you might never have read a single line of Plato. But Homer, he is still everywhere. Troy the movie, shirtless Brad Pitt as Achilles. O Brother, Where Art Thou? The Odyssey reimagined in the American South. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, a Halo video game epic. Plato dreamed of a world ruled by logic, but the world chose Homer to tell its stories. And here is the deeper sting. Plato despised Homer because Homer made people feel. Plato envisioned a society without tears, without softness. Warriors were meant to be cold. Philosophers were to live by reason alone. No one should ever cry over a fictional character. But it was Homer who gave humanity a kind of superpower, the ability to cry over a story. Without Homer, we would not have the very concept of a narrative, the kind of story that connects human beings. Without Homer, Hollywood would have no original scripts. Without Homer, humanity would be stuck with Plato, reading dry philosophy until death. The ultimate irony, the man who hated drama became the main character in one of the longest-running dramas in history. Now imagine the two of them living in the modern world. Homer Odyssey, Season 1, exclusive to Netflix, trending #1 worldwide. Fan art all over Tumblr. Cosplayers in full Achilles armor at Comic-Con. Plato, a 3-hour philosophy podcast on Spotify. Views 5,000. Dislikes 4,000. Top comment, bro, make it shorter. So who won? Plato won the academic world. Philosophy departments still teach his work. But Homer won pop culture. Netflix, Hollywood, manga, video games. They never stop remaking his stories. To put it in meme terms, Plato is the Harvard philosophy professor. Homer is the head writer for the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that is why the hook of this story is more than just an ancient beef. It is an immortal paradox. Plato tried to cancel Homer to build an ideal society, but humanity chose to live in Homer's world, where drama tears myths and love still go viral more than philosophical logic ever could. You think we are living in the age of cancel culture? No. You are just watching the latest season of a drama Plato started writing 2,400 years ago. Homer, the first fantasy writer who may not have existed. Do you know what the strangest thing about Homer is? He is world famous, yet to this day no one is sure he ever existed. Sounds like some conspiracy theory you would find on Reddit, right? Exactly. Homer is basically the Banksy of ancient Greece, a name everyone knows, but no one dares swear they have actually seen in person. All that history tells us is this. There was an old blind man wandering from city to city who would sit down in the middle of the marketplace and start rapping thousands of lines of poetry. No microphone, no beat, no auto-tune. Just a mind-blowing memory and a voice strong enough to silence an entire square. And just like that, the Iliad and the Odyssey were born. To help you picture it, Homer was the world's first freestyle rapper, A man holding an imaginary mic, stepping into a rap battle with humanity itself, and dropping mixtapes so long, you would forget to eat dinner before he finished. If Homer were alive today, Spotify would have signed him to an exclusive deal, Iliad Mixtape Volume 1. 10 years of war over one beautiful woman. Odyssey Volume 2. 24 back-to-back tracks about a lost husband wandering for 10 years, running into everything from cyclops to witches who turn men into pigs. And trust me, Homer would top the Billboard charts, while Odysseus would become the main character in millions of meme reactions. The problem is, we do not have a single word written by Homer himself. Everything was passed down orally, which means Homer might not have existed at all. Homer might have just been a nickname for a whole community of bards, traveling storytellers who performed mythological covers like it was a rock concert on tour. In other words, the Iliad and the Odyssey might be humanity's first collaborative fan fiction. But it is that same oral tradition that made Homer immortal. Picture this Athens 8th century before the Common Era. No television, no TikTok, no podcasts. The only entertainment going to the town square to hear an old man tell a story. But he did not just tell it. He made you cry, made you fear, made you laugh, made you cheer. You saw Achilles burning with rage after being insulted. You saw Hector fall beneath the gates of Troy. You saw Odysseus lost at sea, exhausted, weeping from longing for his wife. That was not philosophy. That was cinema spoken aloud. Homer turned storytelling into a political tool. The Greeks listened to the Iliad and thought so war. Turns heroes into corpses. They listened to the Odyssey and thought the journey home matters more than any conquest. No PowerPoint slides. No academic thesis. Just through stories, Homer uploaded cultural values straight into the minds of an entire civilization. And precisely because Homer became so famous, people started to question him. One scholar asked, "Hold on, how could one man possibly write two gigantic masterpieces like these?" Another chimed in, maybe Homer never existed. Maybe the name is just a fictional invention. And so began a debate that has lasted for over 2,000 years, the Homeric question. At its core, the question is this: was Homer one man, many people, or no one at all? The answer, no one knows. And strangely enough, that very uncertainty made him even more legendary. Have you noticed something? Homer was the prototype for every mythical artist who came after. The more mysterious, the more viral. Banksy hides his face. Fans love him more. No one knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is. Bitcoin becomes legend. We are not even sure Homer existed. Yet the Iliad and Odyssey became immortal. If Homer had published his resume, full address, and birth date, he probably would have been forgotten centuries ago. But whether he was real or not, one thing is undeniable. Homer invented the very first cinematic universe. Iliad plus Odyssey equals the ancient MCU. Characters reappear across different episodes. Zeus and Athena drop cameos left and right. Drama piles upon drama, but with perfect continuity. And most importantly, the audience felt like these stories were their own. Think about it. Today we have Marvel, DC, Harry Potter, and The Lord of the Rings. But all of them are sophisticated remakes of Homer. War, that is the Iliad. Adventure plus monsters, that is the Odyssey. A powerful yet deeply flawed hero, that is Achilles. That is Odysseus. A dangerous goddess, Circe. Calypso. Without Homer, Western pop culture would have no foundation. And here comes the most ironic twist of all. While Plato was building philosophical ideals to teach humanity how to think correctly, Homer, whose existence we cannot even confirm, simply told stories, and yet he taught humanity how to feel. And that feeling, that emotional depth, is what allowed civilization to survive. So maybe Homer was not a single person. Maybe he was a shared nickname. Maybe he was a collective fan fiction project. But to humanity, that does not matter, because people do not need to know whether Homer was real. They only need to know this: thanks to Homer, the world learned what a story truly is. You can imagine a world without Plato. We would lose a bit of logic, but we would still survive. Now imagine a world without Homer, no Marvel, no Netflix, no Hollywood, no fan fiction, no cosplay, no fandoms, no memes about Odysseus. A world with no drama to tell. A world gone silent. A world no longer human. Socrates dies and Plato launches a literary fanfic empire. If this story were a long-running TV series, then Part 3 would be the unexpected plot twist no one wanted. The main character dies. In the philosophical universe of Athens, that moment came in the year 399 before the Common Era, the day Socrates was sentenced to death. Not by sword, not on a blazing battlefield, but with a cup of poison. A sentence handed down by the very city that proudly called itself the cradle of free thought. The charges corrupting the youth and not worshiping the city's gods. Sound familiar? That is right. It was basically the ancient version of "you have violated community standards." Socrates was in essence cancelled by the Athenian assembly, a crowd vote to permanently delete his account. Plato was just 28 years old at the time. He sat there powerless, watching the idol of his life, the man who had completely rebooted the operating system of his mind, being condemned by the entire city. No way to protest, no way to save him, nothing to do. But watch. Socrates stepped onto his final stage. No crying, no screaming, no begging. He sat down, took the cup of poison, and started teaching. Just picture it. In your final moments, most people would pray, write a will, or curse the world. But Socrates, he sat there calmly discussing the immortal soul, why death should not be feared, and how philosophy was his final dose of morphine. Then he drank. He fell. And silence. A death that was philosophical, cinematic, and cruel beyond belief. Plato saw it and knew Athens had just killed a man. But if he did nothing, the world would soon kill the man's ideas too. So instead of seeking revenge, instead of diving into politics, instead of calling for revolution, Plato made a strange choice. He picked up a pen and he started to write. But Plato did not write a memoir. He did not weep or rant. He did not make a tribute video called Socrates: A Life in Pictures. He did something far more radical. He wrote dialogues. In these dialogues, the main character was still Socrates, still sharp, still fearless, still slicing through arguments like a blade, still alive. Plato resurrected his teacher with words. Socrates became the main character of an entirely new literary universe. It opened with apology, the defense speech of Socrates at his trial. And the plot twist came right at the beginning: I know nothing, and that is why I am wiser than those who think they know everything. Who starts a defense speech by admitting they know nothing, only Socrates, and only Plato would dare to write it that way. Then came Crito. Socrates refuses to escape from prison because even unjust laws must be respected. Then Phaedo. Socrates, lying on his deathbed, calmly lectures about the immortal soul like a professor during his final office hour. Then Symposium. Socrates shows up to a wine-soaked party surrounded by drunk philosophers and drops a lecture on love. And in every scene a pattern emerges. Others are drunk. Others are nervous. Others are silent. Only Socrates shines. Sound familiar? Yes, this is fan fiction. Plato was a fanboy. His teacher was gone, but he refused to let his idol die. So he rewrote him, not just retelling, but upgrading, buffing his skills, crafting an overpowered version of Socrates in immortal OP mode. Picture this: you idolize someone. They pass away. You miss them so much that you write dozens of seasons about their life. In your version, they do not just come back. They always win arguments, always speak the truth, always leave you in awe. Congratulations, you have just invented philosophical fan fiction. And that was Plato's genius. He did not just preserve Socrates' words. He turned him into a legendary character, no different from a superhero in modern pop culture. Each book a spin-off, each dialogue an episode. The philosophical universe of Athens became a franchise. And then came the big question: was Plato recording the real Socrates, or using Socrates' voice to speak for himself? Scholars have been debating this for over 2,000 years. This is the real Socrates. No, this is just Plato cosplaying as Socrates. Honestly, it does not matter, because the only Socrates we know is Plato's Socrates. Plato was basically philosophy's first ghostwriter. Not just a ghostwriter, but one who went viral for 24 centuries. In the history of ideas, this was the ultimate plot twist. Before Plato, philosophy was scattered, dry teachings. After Plato, it became a script. There were characters, conflicts, punchlines. Readers were not just taught. They were drawn into a play with Socrates forever in the lead role. Plato did not just defend Socrates. He did something greater. He made him immortal. Socrates died in real life, but in the texts he lives on, still arguing, still provoking, still dropping the mic. Death became the launch point for a fan fiction universe unlike anything before. Think about it. Plato did not take revenge on Athens with violence. He took revenge with words. He turned a death sentence into eternal legend. He used ink instead of a sword. He flexed not with power, but with storytelling. And in the end, who truly won? Athens executed one man. Plato made sure the whole world would remember him for 2,400 years. So this chapter of the story boils down to one thing: Plato did not just write a book. He built a stage. He brought his teacher back to life. And he proved something eternal: you can kill a man. But you cannot kill a character once he has been written into words. Philosophical dialogues that smell like fanfic. If you think Plato was just a serious philosopher spending all day in a library scribbling down academic theories, well, you are partly right. But if you think he was all about objective truth, no fiction, no exaggeration, no creative license, then sorry, you just watched the wrong trailer. The truth is, Plato was the first professional fanfic writer in history. Not fanfiction about Harry Potter, not BTS fanfics, but fanfiction about his own teacher. What is fanfic really? It is when you are so obsessed with a character that you rewrite their story the way you want it told. The character dies, you bring them back. The character is flawed, you buff them into a hero. The character never said something, you write it in and call it canon. That is exactly what Plato did. He took the real Socrates, the grumpy old man always poking people in the marketplace asking what is justice, and turned him into OP mode Socrates, never losing an argument, never shaken, never off his game. Now imagine you are reading a story. It opens with a wild party, music blasting, beautiful women and men flirting, everyone sipping wine and talking about love. Sounds like a dating reality show on Netflix. And then, boom, Socrates walks in. No drinks, no flirting, no kissing. He just asks, "What is love?" And instantly, the party turns into a full-blown philosophical talk show. That is Symposium. The title sounds like a shareholders' meeting, but really it is an indie film episode about love. Each character gives their own definition, from poetic romance to straight-up adult content. But in the end, Socrates drops the twist. Love is not the desire for beauty. It is the desire for eternal beauty. At which point readers are left wondering, wait, am I watching a rom-com or upgrading my soul? Or take the Republic, Plato's fanfic masterpiece. No more wine parties, no more casual chats. He goes all in and builds a whole new world. An ideal city where philosophers rule, artists are banned from performing, and children are raised by the state. It is like a version of The Sims, but instead of cheat codes, it is built on pure philosophy. And guess who delivers the entire PowerPoint presentation for this dystopian, utopian society? Still Socrates, the immortal main character standing in the middle of it all, lecturing like a TED Talk host on stage. See the pattern. Every time Plato writes, Socrates wins. Other characters debate, and in the end, they either agree or go silent. No exceptions. In other words, Plato was not writing dialogues to discover truth. He was writing scripts, and he already knew who was going to win. Sound familiar? Exactly. This is roleplay. Plato writes. Plato casts the characters. Plato lets them talk and debate, but always leaves the final mic drop moment for Socrates. It is just like a Christopher Nolan movie. The script makes you think it is open-ended, but the whole thing was rigged from the start. Pay attention to one of Plato's slickest moves. Many of his dialogues have no ending. Characters walk away. Questions hang in the air. There is no clear answer. Sounds like a bug, but it is actually a feature. Plato is sending a message: life does not come with ready-made answers. Philosophy is not a destination. Philosophy is a journey. You finished reading good. Now keep questioning. And just like that, you, the reader, are pulled into the conversation. You become a character. You keep the debate going in your own head. And Plato wins. He has turned you from audience into actor. But on a deeper level, there is still a big question. Did the real Socrates actually say all the things Plato wrote? The answer nobody knows, because most of what Plato wrote came after Socrates had already died, which means Plato had full creative freedom to ghostwrite without fear of fact checks. There was no one left to comment. Source: Socrates now only existed in Plato's words. And Plato's words became the canon, no questions asked. This was the greatest hack in the history of philosophy. Plato used a real person as a vessel to implant his own ideas, and in doing so, he made philosophy, normally a dry subject, into entertainment. Not a boring lecture, not abstract daydreaming, but a script, with characters, conflict twists, and cliffhangers. Plato turned philosophy into cinema, and Socrates became its immortal lead. You might call Plato manipulative, but you have to admit he was a genius. Who came before him and pulled this off? No one. Who after him dared to copy it? Also no one. Because if you try, people will say you are fake quoting. Stop trying to be Plato 2.0. Plato turned philosophy into fan fiction. But because of that, the world ended up learning philosophy. Without Plato, Socrates would just be a grumpy old man who got executed. Thanks to Plato, Socrates became a monument to critical thinking, printed on meme t-shirts and giving TED Talks in our imagination. Plato did not just write books. He built a stage. He directed the play. He cast the actors. He wrote the lines. And he invited the world to sit down and watch. And over 2,400 years later, the audience still has not gotten up. So let us face the truth. Plato was not just a philosopher. He was a screenwriter, a director, a fanboy who turned his idol into an immortal icon. He was the most viewed ghostwriter in history. Without YouTube, without Netflix, all he needed was a character named Socrates. The cave. A metaphor that hacks your perception from inside your mind. Are you really living in the real world? Sound familiar? Yes. That is The Matrix. That is Inception. That is Black Mirror. Those mind-bending shows that leave you sitting still at the end, wondering, wait, what if I am just a character in someone else's game? But here is the biggest twist. Plato asked this question over 2,400 years ago. No CGI, no slow-motion cameras, no dramatic soundtracks. All he needed was a cave. In the Republic, Plato created a metaphor that has outlived most religions, the allegory of the cave. The setup, you and all of humanity have been chained to a wall since birth. Your face is turned toward the wall. Behind you is a fire, and between you and the fire are people walking back and forth, holding up objects. What do you see? Only shadows. You live your whole life in a world of shadows. Shadows become truth. Shadows become the standard. Shadows become reality. Then one day, someone is unchained. They turn around. They see the fire. They see real objects. They see a world totally different from what they had believed. At first disoriented. Eyes hurt. Can't believe it. Then slowly, they adjust. That person is dragged out of the cave. They see sunlight for the first time. At first, they want to run back inside, but gradually, their eyes adapt. They see trees, people, the sky, and finally, they see the sun, the real source of light. At this point, you might think, I get it. A metaphor for knowledge. Yes, but that is just the beginning. Because Plato throws in a dark twist. This enlightened person goes back into the cave to rescue their friends. They say, hey, what you are seeing are just shadows. The real world out there is nothing like this. And how does the crowd in the cave react? They laugh. They say he is blind. And if he tries to unchain them, they will kill him. Sound familiar? Yes, that is Socrates. Athens sentenced him to death for corrupting the youth. More precisely, he tried to pull people out of the cave. And when the light was too bright, the crowd chose to respond with stones. Plato did not write the cave story to scare his students. He wrote it to encode his teacher's entire life. The cave, Sakam's society, the chains, Apollo's prejudice, the shadows, Apollo's public opinion, mass media, the ancient Greek version of TikTok, the chained, Apollo's all of us, the freed one, the philosopher, the sun, truth. Plato was basically the first hacker of human thought. He saw the system, he saw the code, and he warned. We are living in an illusion, and most people will reject the truth if it strays too far from what they are used to. He did not preach morality. He built a visual that you could never forget. You sit in a philosophy class. You hear the lecture. But what stays with you forever is the cave. And here is where Plato flips the switch to dark mode. The one who sees the light if he returns to the cave will be harmed. And if he dares to speak the truth, he will be destroyed. This is no longer just a theory. It is a psychological map for anyone brave enough to ask, what is the truth, Galileo, Copernicus, Giordano Bruno, modern scientists, social activists, anyone who speaks against the tide? They are all those who left the cave and got cancelled by the crowd still inside it. You might be thinking, so should we even leave the cave? Or is it better to stay and live in peace? Plato does not give an answer. He only shows you the cost. Real light burns your eyes, and truth hurts. The rest is up to you. Stay where it is safe and keep watching shadows, or accept being hated, exiled, attacked, to finally see what is real. The strange part. The cave metaphor does not get old. In fact, it is becoming more accurate with time. Replace shadows on the wall with your newsfeed. Replace the sun with unfiltered data. People in the cave, netizens chasing likes and shares. The one who steps out. The person who dares to post something unpopular. And what happens next? They get reported, banned, cancelled. Plato wrote for Athens, but it feels like he was writing for Twitter in the year 2025. Do you see it now? Plato did not need tech. He did not need viral clips. He just needed a cave of flame and a few shadows. And he created a philosophical meme that will never die. Every time you ask yourself, is what I believe actually true? You are reliving that exact metaphor. But wait, do not misunderstand. Plato did not write this to make you feel hopeless. He wrote it to remind you the door is always there, but you have to choose to walk through it. And if you do leave the cave, do not expect applause. But you will see the real world, and you will never look at the shadows the same way again. That is the brilliance behind Plato's game. He does not preach. He tells a story. A story simple enough for a child to understand, and deep enough for Harvard professors to keep debating for centuries. You might disagree with his philosophy, but you cannot ignore the cave. And that is when you realize philosophy is not some lofty theory. Philosophy is light. Painful, uncomfortable, but impossible to fake. You see, philosophy is just like Plato's cave. If you do not hit subscribe, you are still sitting in the dark, watching shadows flash across your screen, then disappearing. But if you hit that subscribe button, you are taking a step outside the cave, joining me on a journey to see history from a perspective you have never seen before. And a comment that is your way of showing you are not just sitting silently in the dark. It means you are brave enough to speak, to ask, to challenge. Do not let your thoughts stay chained by silence. Subscribe so the next story can pull you further away from the shadows laid out by official history. And leave a comment if you want to prove that you are not just watching, you are thinking. Plato anti-democracy, but wants to save the world by letting philosophers rule. If there was one idea that made the people of Athens want to flip a table in Plato's time, it was his political philosophy. You might think Plato was a fan of freedom, democracy, open debate. Sorry, he hated democracy more than Elon Musk hates taxes. Plato had witnessed with his own eyes the glitch version of Athenian democracy. A city that prided itself on direct voting, and yet voted to execute Socrates. The man who, in Plato's view, should have had a golden statue in the middle of the town square. The result: the greatest teacher of the age was forced to drink poison, while the crowd, the so-called will of the people, applauded. What did Plato learn from that? That democracy is the voice of freedom. He came to one very clear conclusion: the crowd is dumb. To help you understand, Plato saw democracy like a ship. On the ship, there are sailors and there is a captain. But Athenian democracy let the sailors vote on which way to sail. The result, everyone yelling in different directions, the ship spinning in circles until it crashes into the rocks. Plato's verdict: if you are sick, you go to a doctor. You do not start a poll on Twitter. If you are building a house, you hire an architect, not your neighbor with duct tape. So why, when it comes to running an entire country, should every citizen vote like it is open mic night? And that is when Plato dropped one of his most controversial and dangerous ideas. A vision that is both utopia and dystopia society should be ruled by philosophers. Yes, the philosopher king. Someone who is wise, ethical, and loves truth more than money. A leader who cannot be bribed by gold, seduced by power, or distracted by popularity. A ruler who serves only what is good. Sounds like the perfect LinkedIn profile, right? The problem, does anyone like that even exist? Or was Plato just writing a job description for Superman? For Plato, this was no dream. He truly believed that philosophers had left the cave, seen the light, seen the truth, and therefore were the only ones qualified to guide those still watching shadows. In other words, the rest of us, we are just NPCs. We vote, we argue, we think we are smart. But really, we are the chained ones staring at the wall, calling shadows reality. Only the philosopher is the main character. Sound familiar? Yes. This was the prototype for every rule-by-expert system that came after. From Confucian scholar bureaucrats in ancient China, to modern technocrats, to billionaire CEOs who believe artificial intelligence will save humanity. All of them carry the echo of Plato's message: do not let the crowd decide. Let the truly intelligent steer the ship. And here comes the deepest irony of all. Plato despised democracy, but what he proposed was essentially just another form of dictatorship. The only difference, this one wore the robes of a philosopher. If you were born into Plato's ideal society, you would not get to choose your own career. The state would sort you from childhood. Gold class, philosopher rulers. Silver class, warriors, chatityon, bronze and iron, farmers, craftsmen, laborers. You are basically a character in The Sims. Plato is the game master, and you live out the role you were assigned at birth. No such thing as career freedom like we have today. And this is where you begin to see the tension in Plato's philosophy. On one hand, he wanted to save humanity from collective stupidity. On the other, he accidentally created the blueprint for every kind of dictatorship that says we know what is good for you better than you do. Plato might say, I never wanted to be a tyrant. I just wanted to eliminate the worst parts of democracy. But history is not kind. Countless tyrants have quoted Plato to justify their power. Here's the funny part: Plato believed that philosophers would never be corrupt, that they would never chase money, because they loved truth above all else. But now imagine a philosopher on the throne. Every day he's giving speeches about justice, truth, and beauty. Meanwhile, the people are starving, the soldiers want war, and the merchants want to trade. What will the philosopher do? Maybe he'll hold a 3-day symposium just to redefine the word justice, while outside, the people are already rioting. And that is what makes Plato's idea both terrifying and seductive. Terrifying, because it strips away your personal freedom. Seductive, because deep down, we all secretly want that perfect, wise ruler to take control and fix the chaos. It sounds a lot like letting an AI run the world, a purely rational machine free from greed or emotion, making decisions based only on logic. But here's the problem. Are you sure the AI will define fairness the way you do, or will it optimize for something else, and you become just another piece of collateral damage? Plato is the father of Western political philosophy. But he is also the father of a lingering fear, the fear that in our hunger for someone wise to lead us, we might willingly give up our freedom. Sure, democracy can be chaotic, but at least it gives you a voice. Plato's society. It is clean logical, but it does not let you choose. So here's the final question. Would you rather be a sailor voting in all directions, or live on a ship where the captain is a philosopher you never chose but must blindly trust? That is Plato's ironic punchline. He teaches us to question democracy, but also forces us to ask, is there really something better? And after 2,400 years, we still do not have an answer. Plato versus Homer. The battle of ideas, who truly won? If history were a UFC tournament for ideas, the final match would no doubt be the ultimate face-off between two heavyweights, Plato versus Homer. In one corner, the grumpy philosopher, allergic to drama, addicted to logic. In the other, the blind storyteller, mythological rap battler who turned war into binge-worthy content. These two never met in real life, but on paper, they have been fighting for over 2,400 years. Plato saw Homer the way boomers see TikTok. This is not art. This is what's corrupting the youth. He wrote the Republic like an indictment pointing straight at Homer and declaring you turned heroes into crybabies. You made warriors soft. The youth will grow weak, misguided. You are destroying society. Sound familiar? That was basically the first ever cancel post in the history of civilization. But Homer never got a chance to clap back. He was already dead, or maybe never existed at all. No podcast, no rebuttal. All that remained were his songs, his stories, his place in the cultural bloodstream. And that was the plot twist Plato never saw coming. The more Plato tried to ban Homer, the more the people loved him. The more Plato raged, the more the public memorized his lines. Call Homer toxic, fine. The whole city of Athens will still gather every night, drink wine, and sing the Iliad until sunrise. In truth, Plato was not wrong when he called Homer dangerous. Dangerous in the sense that Homer made people feel. You read the Iliad and you feel Achilles' rage. You mourn Hector's death. You watch Priam begging for his son's body. And you cry. You get angry. You feel compassion. You learn empathy, something Plato saw as weakness. But the rest of humanity calls being human. Plato was different. He did not want you to cry. He wanted you to debate, to sit in a cold room drawing blueprints for a perfect society redefining justice. He wanted you to become a logic NPC, always correct, but never capable of tears. Sounds noble. But now picture a world with no movies, no music, no memes, only essays and eternal debates. A world built entirely on Plato's specs. Could you survive in Plato City? Homer gave us entertainment. Plato gave us enlightenment. One feeds the heart, the other feeds the mind. So what did humanity choose? Look around. Netflix, Marvel, anime, video games, all are descendants of Homer. Philosophy, still confined to lecture halls where a few thousand students try not to fall asleep. Plato may have won the syllabus, but Homer won popular culture. Let's be blunt. Socrates, Plato's main character. How many Hollywood movies does he have? Just one. Agora. And he only shows up as a cameo. Achilles, Hector, Odysseus, a whole library of films. From Troy to O Brother, Where Art Thou to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Who went viral? No debate. Plato might have declared, there is no place for Homer in the ideal state. But 2,400 years later, where do we find Plato in textbooks? And Homer in movie theaters on Netflix in 808 video games. In other words, Plato is academia. Homer is pop culture. And this world, sorry to say, always leans toward pop culture. Shakti Kotri Mamaki. But here's the ironic punchline: Plato wrote dozens of books trying to prove that philosophers deserve to rule. And yet he became immortal because of a fanfic about Homer. Read the Republic closely. The part where Plato cancels Homer. That is the part students remember most. People do not read Plato for his definition of justice. They read him and go, wait. He really hated Homer that much Plato tried to erase Homer. But thanks to Plato, Homer became even more iconic. Put the two side by side. Homer taught humanity to cry. Plato taught humanity to argue. Both are essential. Without Homer, we become cold, emotionless robots. Without Plato, we become drama junkies with no critical thought. And maybe it is this very contradiction that made both men immortal. Now imagine if Plato and Homer both had YouTube channels. Homer's channel, Odyssey Season 1, an epic adventure series. Thumbnails with monsters, goddesses, explosions. Views 50 million. Top comment, bro please drop Season 2. Plato's channel, What is Justice? A 3-hour live stream. Views $2,000. Top comment, anyone still awake at the 20-minute mark? Who wins? No contest. But if you ask who left a deeper mark on how we think, the answer is more complicated. Because even if most people never read Plato, the idea that there is something higher than shadows, higher than drama, that's Plato's fingerprint on our minds. In other words, Homer wins the heart. Plato wins the mind. And humanity, we are greedy enough to keep both. And that is the ultimate twist. The battle between Plato and Homer never had a loser. Each won a different battlefield. Plato lives in books classrooms, places where people are forced to study. Homer lives in cinema games, places where people choose to binge. One built ideals, the other built stories, and both became pillars of Western civilization. So when you ask who really won, the answer is both, and at the same time, neither. Because in the end, it is humanity that wins. We get Plato to debate, and Homer to weep. We get philosophy to question, and drama to feel. And that is the strange, beautiful balance of history. The ending, the immortal paradox of the written word. If you have stayed with me this far, through Homer's drama, Plato's fanfic empire, that dark cave of illusions, and the endless war between logic and storytelling, then congratulations. You have reached the ultimate twist in the history of human thought, the immortality paradox. Because in the end, both Plato and Homer died. But their words did not. Could think about it. Whether Homer was real or not does not matter. What matters is that the Iliad and the Odyssey still exist. Still read, still told, still remade into blockbusters. Achilles is dead. Hector is dead. Odysseus grew old. But Homer's characters have never left the human imagination. And Plato's Socrates truly died. Athens thought it had erased him with a cup of poison. But Plato rewrote him. And just like that, Socrates became immortal. The strongest fictional character in the history of philosophy. This is the paradox: human lives are finite. But written words are not. You can burn a philosopher, hang a prophet, imprison a writer. But if they leave behind words, you have already lost. Because words are parasites. They cling to the reader's mind, replicate themselves, mutate, spread. They live on in every new version, in every retelling. Plato even mocked this idea himself. In Phaedrus, he warns writing is dangerous. It makes people lazy. It stops them from remembering. It creates the illusion of knowledge, not true understanding. Sounds just like modern teachers complaining about Google Write. And that is the paradox. The man who feared writing used writing to become immortal. Plato criticized writing, but Plato lives on through writing. And Homer even funnier. He never wrote. He only rapped. He only told stories aloud. And yet generations later, others wrote down his words, packaged them into the Iliad and the Odyssey. And just like that, a man who may not have existed became immortal through words. If Homer was never real, then the Iliad and the Odyssey are humanity's first collective fan fiction. And that fanfic has outlived almost every official epic ever written. Shakuksa, put them side by side. Plato believed philosophers achieve immortality. Homer believed stories achieve immortality. And 2,400 years later, it turns out they were both right. You might not remember Plato's exact definition of justice, but you remember the cave. You might not have read all of the Iliad, but you know Helen, Achilles, Troy, because it is the words, whether philosophical or mythological, that remain long after flesh and bone have turned to dust. Now you see how strange humanity truly is. We do not achieve immortality through our bodies, but through narrative, through stories. Death only wins, if you leave nothing behind. But once you write something down, it latches onto someone's mind and stays there, generation after generation. Plato achieved immortality by turning Socrates into a character. Homer became eternal by shaping Achilles, Odysseus, and Hector into myths. Both proved the same thing. A character is stronger than the real person. So who really won this entire drama? Not Plato, not Homer, but writing. The softest, quietest, most invisible weapon. Stronger than armies, stronger than kings, stronger than gods. Armies vanish, empires fall, gods are replaced. But once words are written into the brain, they live. Here's the ultimate irony: Plato tried to cancel Homer with words. But because Plato wrote, Homer became even more famous. Turns out the two were never true enemies. They were collaborators in the greatest unintentional collab project of all time, the project to keep humanity alive inside a story. And if you zoom in on today, we are still repeating the same old script. Someone gets canceled on social media. They go even more viral. A banned author. Their book becomes a bestseller. A fictional character dies. Fanfic brings them back to life. Plato and Homer ran this experiment 2,400 years ago. We are just watching season 25 of the remake. So here is the final punchline: you can hate Plato. You can call Homer overrated. You can say their ideas are toxic, outdated, or confusing, but you cannot erase them, because their words have already embedded themselves in the human brain. And words do not die. The immortality paradox of history goes like this: humans always die. Fictional characters live. And writing is the time machine that brings the dead back to life. Plato is dead. Homer is dead, or maybe never existed. But through writing, both are here right now. Trolling you, arguing with you, whispering in your head. Thank you for sticking around till the very end. It means you are no longer just staring at the shadows on the cave wall. You have taken at least one step toward the light with me. But Plato would ask, will you stop here, or will you keep going? That subscribe button, that is your door out of the darkness, where you no longer just listen, but walk with us on the next journey through history. And that comment, that is your proof that you are not silent like the crowd in the cave, but brave enough to speak, to question, to push back. Hit subscribe so the next story, darker, sharper, funnier, reaches you before the scroll swallows it.